Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. For over a century, the automotive industry, the interior of it was defined by what you could touch and feel, the knobs, the steering wheels, the leather, and such. And the digital cockpit that we live in today is defined by pixels, processors, and platforms instead. And it's the most valuable and complex contested real estate in the automotive industry. And that brings us to the heart of our today's conversation, the digital cockpit revolution driving brand differentiation and revenue. And this isn't just a technical challenge, it's a business challenge. According to BCG, 44% of 18 to 30-year-olds, the younger generation, would buy a car that they have never seen. And this young generation demands features like OTAs, digital options, online purchases. And they are even willing to buy Chinese OEM cars, which have yet to be proven for its life cycle of 15 years, 20 years, correct? So, in the world where every car has a giant screen, how do these different OEMs differentiate themselves to bring customers to them? When every customer has a cell phone with free apps, how do you generate a sustainable source of revenue through a digital cockpit? And that's the heart of the conversation today. And for the next 45 minutes, we are going to deconstruct this and get to the few key concepts and few challenges in this space. So, in the next 45 minutes, we'll define what is a new cockpit, how different user personas from trucking industry to luxury OEM customers, how do they differ, and also how do the regions play the game. And we will answer the blunt questions about monetization, whether it's truly a reality or it's a promise yet to be proven. And of course, at the end, we will tackle the elephant in the room, which is about projection and how OEMs are addressing that topic. So for this discussion today, we have amazing three panelists. Myself, Sushma Shah, I'm your moderator, and I have the honor to introduce you to our three panelists. So the first and foremost is Mel Roberts, the Director of North American Infotainment and Features Planning at Stellantis. Mel is our planner. She is on the front lines deciding what features go into the car. She has the massive challenge of balancing customer insights, tech trends, and brand strategy for a huge portfolio from a rugged Jeep to a premium Grand Wagoneer. Next up, please welcome Alex Leonov, the Manager of Productivity Services at Volvo Group North America. Alex is our monetizer. His job is literally to generate revenue from digital services. He brings a critical and unique perspective from the commercial vehicle world where the cockpit isn't just for the infotainment, it's a high stakes productivity tool for fleets and drivers. And finally, please welcome Gyanendra Sharma, a senior HMI researcher of Audi North America. Gyanendra is our human factor expert. He is the how does it feel guy. His research focuses on safety, usability, and psychology of how drivers interact with the technology, especially as we move towards semi-autonomous systems. We have the planner, the monetizer, and the HMI researcher, and this is the exact right team to talk about this topic. So let's dive in. So the first and foremost, we want to define what digital cockpit experience truly is. So let's start with Mel, maybe. Mel, just to level set, the term digital cockpit, this gets used a whole lot. So what do you define a digital cockpit? So when you're looking at all these features and planning of it, how do you define it? Is it just the car? Is it things outside the car? So could you kind of help us kind of level set that?
Absolutely. And I think the context in your question is right on. A digital cockpit extends beyond the screens to the entire ecosystem. When it's done well, it seamlessly integrates the domains of infotainment, ADAS, and BCI vehicle function. So BCI, body, chassis, interior, with all of that real-time connectivity, the sensor data for a really immersive, proactive, and personalized experience. So that digital cockpit will leverage all those enabling technologies, such as the cloud compute, the OTA, the AI, the advanced EE architectures, SDV, the high performance compute. Those will be the unseen heroes that provide this seamless experience to our customers.
That's amazing because, for a user or a day-to-day consumers like you and me, we just think once we get into the car, what you see and touch and feel is the digital cockpit. But nobody understands the technical challenge behind putting that together. So thank you for that perspective. So Alex, let's take a look at the trucking industry, because now Mel has talked about the passenger industry. So how do you see this? How do you define the digital cockpit in the trucking industry, and how does it differ from Mel's definition of digital cockpit in the passenger section?
Excellent question, Sushama. So I think, it's important to understand that a heavy-duty truck is an investment for the fleet owner, first and foremost, right? So it has to generate revenue. And every time the truck is, sitting in the shop, it's a downtime for the fleet. So the digital services in the commercial space really centered around, uptime and things like compliance and safety. So it's different from the passenger car market in terms of, we also, the different personas involved. It's not just the driver, it's also, the fleet owner and manager. And so it's different in a number of ways, but just remember that the truck is an investment, so it has to make money for the owner.
So essentially, it's not just an entertainment hub, but it's a productivity tool for the consumers, and your consumers could be different. And we'll talk about the users in a bit, but I would like to also round out this question with Gyanendra. So, Gyanendra, in your SGMI research, right? So, you are the one who is looking at what customers truly want. So, how do you see from that perspective, what are the key enabling technologies you see driving this revolution?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think in majority of the cases, some of the primary enablers are basically the ideas that we can actually see what the vehicle is planning to do, what the vehicle decides to do, what the vehicle wants to do. Those kind of things are amplified and seen in the visual cockpit, what we call the cockpit, right? So I think the primary focus, especially from the user side of things, when they sit in a car and they look at the instrument cluster or the CID or whatever information they can get, there's a lot of expectations regarding, okay, I need to really know what the car is thinking, what the car is planning to do, what does want me to do, what is my role here, those kind of things. So I think this mix up what kind of Mel touched on as well in terms of like being able to build this like holistic system where the car and the person or the driver or the passenger, they're kind of really tied together because each other, like both the car as well as the driver are able to see each other. Like the car kind of keeps track of whether people are asleep or like they're falling asleep or dozing off or things like that. Whereas the person is kind of looking at the visual information to kind of get and make a sense of what the car plans to do. So I think that's kind of where the expectations regarding the safety and the critical aspects of the ADAS are going towards, at least from my experience. But then I think we'll touch on the topic later on, but in the overall like other kind of experience, like the social experience, and that's a whole different like ballgame altogether. But at least from the safety aspect, it's able to be able to see the car and the car able to see the person as well.
That's good to know. Just to touch upon a little bit further, is it AI? Is it like advanced voice recognition or
Mhm.
augmented reality or all the things that are connecting? Because nowadays, I mean, I would be doing disservice if I didn't ask you about AI and what users are looking forward to, right? AI,
Mhm.
it's one thing that a car does what you ask it to do, but it's another thing to kind of see and predict what the
Mhm.
users might want to do. So, how do you see this type of new experiences evolving in the coming years?
Absolutely. So I think from the user side of things, so that I think the AI comes into two places, I think. So there's the AI that actually enables these key technologies, enables performance of the vehicle, the AI that's built to like drive the vehicle around without any human intervention, those kind of things. So that's like a whole OEM level or AI, I would say. But then from the user side of things, there's an almost like a given that the car is smart now. Like they when they sit in a vehicle, in any kind of vehicle, now they kind of expect the car to be smart in some way. But at the end of the day, what we also have to think, and we get to see this a lot during our user studies, is people really want a simple way to understand what the vehicle is trying to do, which means the AI technology here would be something like, as you mentioned, a voice recognition technology. So instead of trying to figure out the button or the clicks, how do I change the lane or blah, blah, blah. A lot of times what they want to say is like, okay, hey car, just change the lane for me. And then they would be happy with it because it's simple. It's something that is like a natural level interaction. And AI kind of enables that. But at the same time, I think there's a different frontiers of AI that one enables human interaction and one that actually enables the vehicle itself.
And that I love that distinguish because one is the safety aspect and one is just more of like comprehending what the user actually wants to do. So
Yeah.
absolutely, it's like a mixed criticality software
Yeah.
interaction.
Yeah.
So if we dig to the next topic, right? Or maybe a little further into this. So Alex, your world is a productivity services for Mac and Volvo trucks. This is a perfect place to start with personas and what features and services are most in demand for your key personas, the truck driver, the fleet managers. So how do you see their needs and their personas are taken into account? Like what kind of user personas would you take into account to determine, the digital cockpit experiences?
And it's actually a little bit more complex than that. So when we say fleet manager, it's actually, it could be a safety manager, operations efficiency manager, sustainability manager, and they all have a little stake in this in experience. But just for simplicity's sake, we can say there's a fleet side and there's a driver side to that equation. Again, for the just one example, right? So trucking is one of the most regulated industries. And so there's every driver has to have this so-called green book, right? The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration guidelines. Also, there are different regulations in different states. And what if you have to cross the border to Canada, for example? A lot to know for a driver. So compliance is one area that we can address with digital services, and it can be infotainment-based services like apps. So hours of service, right? Drivers have to strictly follow the rules. They can't drive for more than 11 hours per day. They have to take regulated breaks. And so, for example, Volvo provides an electronic login device app by our partner company, Geotab, in our infotainment system. So where drivers don't need to bring any devices. We already have the telematics unit on every truck, right? So, and we provide this information, right? So something that is required by law. But there are many other examples, productivity, safety. What they have in common is that all those applications, they use vehicle data. So that's something, we can accommodate as an OEM. So yes, but entertainment is still important. If you're a truck driver and you spend 11 hours in the cab every day, so you probably want to listen to music or talk shows or something like that. So for example, we provide SiriusXM app with a lot of choices. Again, it's almost more important in a way than for a passenger car driver because you have a captive audience essentially.
Absolutely, you're right on. In one of my previous life, I was working with Eaton, and their view was every engineer should know how to drive a truck, so we could design a transmission where you could understand how the transmission shifts when you sit in the driver's seat. And that was an amazing experience because it's like customer first mindset, right? And it was an eye-opening experience because it really tells you about the different types of customers that are behind it. And it's glad to see that the same is actually essentially becoming the user personas for the trucking industry, right? The fleet managers, the drivers, and any other managers who need that productivity data within the company to kind of service that fleet. So that's amazing to see how it's different from the automotive market. So coming to the automotive market, Mel, like your portfolio at Stellantis, I mean, it's vast. The number of brands you cover, the number of vehicles, the lineups, the cost point of view, is just vast, right? So what does a Jeep owner want from their cockpit versus a Ram fleet operator versus a Chrysler family minivan, which is so famous? How do you balance that? Like, how do you take into account these user personas, or are there different additional personas that you have to think about? Like, if you could enlighten us.
Sure. Yeah. Because of our unique portfolio, we start every conversation with that persona in mind. So we have developed coursework and taught human-centered design training to provide the framework for our teams to begin with empathy mapping and persona definition to make sure we're all speaking the same language. And we're really, like you said, getting behind the wheel to develop that empathy. So we want to make sure that we're ensuring cockpit experiences that reflect the lifestyle, the usage patterns, and the emotional drivers that are so inherent to our brands. So just to give an example of that, for something seemingly simple, like the layout of the buttons on a key fob, we always think about the use case and the customer journey from each of those perspectives before we aggregate on a solution. So the Chrysler family, as you mentioned, they're going to want liftgate access and sliding doors on the key fob. You know, mom's got a handful of groceries to push in the cart. I need to be able to load that easy, and I need the kids that can walk to pile right in that car and get out of that busy parking lot. And a Jeep and a Ram owner will want a physical key for those exterior lockup compartments because they are on the work site or they are off-roading and they have the open air experience to the full effect, and they might have a few valuables that they want to get in there. So you have to think about that. So breaking it down into steps, we start with that persona, we map their emotional and their functional needs. Then we align with that brand promise. You know, the capability, the productivity, the comfort. And then we are going to leverage those enabling technologies we talked about earlier, the common tech backbone, but differentiate that user experience for each brand. And then make sure that we go back to the customer. Here's what we thought we heard when we did our empathy mapping in our customer journey. Now that we have this concept flushed out, is this how you envision working with it? So it is definitely a feedback loop.
Wow, that's like a holistic view of how it is done and a little bit behind the curtains view of it. I didn't think about the key fob, by the way. I really did not. And I must
Can
tell
you
you, I love,
imagine
I
how
know.
much discussion goes in just to what button does what?
I know, that's just enlightening. And we as users take it for granted. All you do is put your key fob in a drawer, take it up, and go and leave, right? All you want is to work. But I never thought about this. Like, I have changed so many cars, but I have never actually paid attention. But I'm glad to see somebody like you is behind it and doing the right thing for the right user. So to Ganendra. Your bio mentions reporting to stakeholders in Germany and your research in autonomous users. What can you tell us about the regional differences? How does a user in China, for example, values the features differently than a user in EU and USA? Because these regional differences could create almost a new, maybe a persona. So what are your thoughts about it? Like, how do you see it?
Absolutely. So in a sense, the personas and then the user expectations of the users in different regions are very, very different. So I mean, I think China being a prime example where the concept of like social, uh, I don't know, social interaction within the vehicle itself is like so common, but then that's not really much so in the US or in the European region at the moment. We're more concerned about safety and providing more features within the vehicle itself. But for example, if you go to China, you can do WeChat and everything that's all integrated within the vehicle, and it's almost a given and an expectation, right? So that's why like traditional OEMs like the Audi or like a lot of the OEMs that we know about, they're finding a little bit difficult to find the footing in China is because user expectations have really, really drastically changed now, right? So that's one thing. But then if you look at, for example, Europe, and because I work for a German company, and then if you look at the expectations around what the vehicle can do and what are the user expectations in Germany versus like in the US, or even within the US, Bay Area versus like Southern California, and then if you go to the East Coast, the user personas are very, very different. And then to give a very simple example, right? So, and I think just like similar to a button example, if you think about the speed sign in Europe or at least in Germany is a circular one. So, but then in the US, stop sign is circular. So if you design an icon that says here's a stop sign with a circular one in Germany and you import that to the US, people are going to think it's a stop sign, not a speed sign anymore. So those kind of things. And these are like small details that kind of, it's hard to really imagine it. But then when you put a user behind the wheel and ask them questions about it, they immediately go like, oh, that's a stop sign. So those kind of things that we see that happen quite a bit in our user studies here. But at the same time, so that kind of, again, going back to the same ideas of like the expectations of users that drive in the Bay Area, the expectations of users that drive in, let's say, North Carolina or New York, and the expectation of users that drive in Germany, and the expectation of users that drive in China are like very, very different. And of course, you can build a chassis and you can build a car in a way that works for all the different reasons. But the human interaction part is really have to be cognizant of what the user is trying to do and what they expect to do when they sit in a vehicle. And especially when you go towards autonomous side of things where people actually have time rather than just drive the vehicle, then that becomes even more important, I think.
That's so fantastic to see. And I can't imagine how much travel you get to do just to get those user feedbacks. I love that part. So all of you, right? Like I really appreciate you sharing the user personas and the technology that has to come together to provide these experiences, right? Whether it's a regional one, whether it's different family members versus, sports car drivers or luxury car drivers or trucking companies. So in this evolving space, how do you see safety and the regulations around distraction play a role? Because when I was leading a team developing infotainment applications, this was a key factor for us. We had to make sure that our applications were certified so that they met some regulation. There was a homologation, so they kind of, adjust to different regions. So how do you see going forward as you push the boundaries of this digital cockpit experience? How do these regulations influence it? How fast and how different experiences could potentially materialize for your customers? So maybe we start with Mel.
Sure. I think from coming from the engineering perspective, validation is really important, and leveraging on the expertise of my colleagues here on this call, even the UX is really important. As mentioned earlier, it's the idea not just about what the vehicle can see, but what the vehicle's communicating to you as the driver that you can see, so that I have the confidence in my vehicle that it's going to make the right decisions as I'm approaching decision points in autonomy and increasing levels of autonomy. So as we know that the customer adoption of autonomy features has been slow, it's been tepid. People are uncomfortable with them, and maybe some of the initial rollout of these features didn't feel value added. So as we start to increase that functionality and that capability, making sure that the customer in the vehicle itself immersing into that UX is feeling like my vehicle is making the right decision as I'm approaching an intersection. I see the biker on the right of my car, and I see that my car sees it based on the visual feedback that I'm getting. So it's that, I think, UX is the most important aspect to this idea of customer safety and adoption going forward.
Absolutely. It's so interesting, Mel. So this is just my family. So I drive a Lyric. So it has obviously the GM Super Cruise. And my son's sitting in the back. We are on the highway driving. And he says, Mama, get in the Super Cruise. And I'm like, yes, I can. And it just hits you differently. And that
Yes.
itself is a proof that the next generation is very comfortable with technology. So it's very interesting to see how this regulation is going to evolve in this space. And thank you for sharing that, Mel. So how about Alex, maybe you can share your point of view on how you see the regulations evolve to enable some of these experiences.
Well, I mean, Mel was talking about the safety, right? And safety is a paramount, for heavy-duty trucks. When you operate a 80,000-pound vehicle, right? Of course, you need to make sure that it's safe. So one of the trends that I see in trucking is increasing adoption of the driver-facing camera solutions. So there are multiple reasons for that. I mean, safety, obviously. Also, it helps to have in case of an accident, right? There will be a footage and it will help exonerate the truck driver, because the industry been plagued by so-called nuclear verdicts. Which is very unfortunate, and every time there's an accident involving truck driver, truck drivers tends to be at fault, whether it's sufficiently substantiated or not. So this technology is definitely coming to trucks, but also, for example, we always try for Volvo. I mean, it's like it's part of our DNA, safety. So we were the first truck OEM to introduce what we call E911 call, which is, I know that, we're all behind the passenger cars in that, but, we're still ahead of other truck manufacturers. So if there's an accident, it'll be automatically generated, so there'll be a call to emergency services, or you can actually, use the SOS button and talk to the operator. So there's just some examples, safety related.
That's amazing, right? These these experiences create such a safe environment for all of us, right? And especially when you're driving, even for a consumer who is driving off-road somewhere in a rural areas, that plays such an important part where you may not even know where exactly you are at that moment. So it's good to know. So Gyanendra, maybe your point of view, so we can round out this
Sure.
point of view from
Sure.
research.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the human factors, there's this classic theory behind like called a risk homeostasis, right? So generally, what people tend to do is as they are enabled with more and more advanced technology or more and more support from the system being the car in this case, they tend to take more and more risks. So meaning you can imagine that if you're driving manually, you're probably keeping a lot more attention. But then in a level 2 system where you're still supposed to pay full attention to the road, people tend to of course, you're giving them a system where they have to do absolutely nothing, but at the same time, you kind of expect them to do sort of everything, like pay attention and things like that, right? So people tend to okay, say, now the car is driving on its own. I have a confidence in the system. I'm going to maybe, I don't know, quickly check my emails and things like that. So the way they take the risks kind of increases as the technology enables them to kind of do so. And I think this is where regulation and safety aspects really comes into play because otherwise, I mean, in terms of the OEM structure, in terms of the profit structure, it might be good to let them do whatever they want. But at the end of the day, we need to keep them safe. And that has to come from like the governance, and that has to come from the safety aspect, which says, no, you have to make sure that they're actually paying attention to the road. That's why we annoy them by in 4 5 seconds saying, hey, you gotta pay attention to the road, right? So those kind of things kind of come into play. And it's actually even more prevalent in Germany and Europe more than the US. US is a bit more like you get to do a bit of whatever you want until you break one of the rules, but Europe is more like you're going to make the rules and then you have to follow them kind of thing. So there's a bit of a paradox there. But I think regulars are important, especially at this point in time where we haven't gotten to a point of like full level 4 system. So once you're in a level 4 system, sure, you can do whatever you want in the car. It doesn't matter because the car is taking full responsibility and even to some extent level 3. But then when you are transitioning from like manual to semi-autonomous to autonomous, these are like really confusing times for a lot of users and they kind of overestimate or overtrust the system and then they tend to take this risk. And I think that's why the regulation to kind of make sure that we are safe even during this transition phase is actually quite important, I would say.
That's fantastic view. I didn't think about all this evolving difficulty as the technology for autonomous is evolving. The user personas and the experiences that you have to define, they also evolve with it, which I understand on a day-to-day point of view. But now that you mention it, it just totally makes sense how difficult the job of the people who design these experiences behind the scene. So now that we have talked about, what defines the digital cockpit, even the key fob that is part of the user experience. And, we talked about how the screens are getting bigger, the touch surfaces where you can provide different interfaces to the user to engage with the car are different now. So how do you see the safety play in the role? Because I have seen some like windshields which have AR augmented or heads up displays or information that is like almost getting into the windshield and higher, right? And when I overlay that with this autonomous feature, I kind of see like pretty much I think any surface in the car could become a surface for interface for the customer, right? At that point, if the car is really taking over, do I really need a windshield? I mean, do I really need a steering wheel, for example, right? So this is an evolving phase, but what is your thought process in that, Gyanendra? Like, how do you see that kind of explode potentially?
Sure. Sure. And I think that's a good question. And also, I don't know how common it is in the rest of the US, but it's in the Bay Area, right now we see Waymo and Jukes a lot, right? So, and those are exactly the case in points in terms of what the question is about. So when you are in that automated structure or automated system, you can have a system like Waymo where you have still a steering wheel that kind of moves when it's like driving the car. You're still sitting in a traditional car. It's all advanced with sensors and stuff, but at the end of the day, you still feel like there's somebody kind of a ghost kind of driving the car. But then when you sit in a Zoox vehicle, for example, then you feel like you just don't feel anything about it being a car anymore. It's a space that you sit in and it kind of moves. That's it, right? So I think when we get to the point of having a fully autonomous systems, we have to fundamentally rethink what a vehicle or what a car is. I think car is may or may not be a thing that's personal, which is right now, that's the case, right? Every have a vehicle, you have a vehicle, we have an association with the vehicle that we drive. But when you have an autonomous system, I think there's a point in time where we're gonna realize that it's just a means to an end that takes from A to B, and then you get to experience a lot of things. You can still like customize, you can still have a brand value to it, brand identity around it, but at the end of the day, the fundamental way we think about a vehicle has to change, and it will change. And I think these are like the two kind of examples that are kind of playing out in the public right now, and then we'll kind of see where we go from there. But I think it's a very interesting thing that's happening very soon, I would say. Yeah.
I think that that is like a puzzle that is amazing to see how it will unfold, I must
Yeah.
say. So now that we have talked about like personas and what a digital cockpit is, maybe let's talk about the monetization, right? Like the reality of money. Show me the money kind of a thing. So according to BCG, cars and truck market will be 8.3 trillion US dollar revenue and $524 billion profit by 2035. That's just 10 years from now, right? Technically 9 years because 25 is almost over now. But that's a lot of money. That's a lot of revenue. That's a lot of employment. And that's a lot of cars being created. I think this year, just for the car market, right, it's 83 million cars are sold worldwide. That's a huge number. So, Alex, as your role as a monetizer, generating revenue from these digital services, how are you leveraging user preferences to create new and reoccurring revenue streams? Like, how are you thinking in this trucking industry space?
So in the trucking industry, if you're able to address the your customer needs and pain points, they'll be more than willing to pay for the service. And basically, it comes down to if you can help them generate revenue, or you can help them cut the operational costs. And another one I would put as a separate category is safety, right, and compliance. So if you can address those three, right, it's not that difficult to actually monetize, but you have to really address the those pain points. So if we look at the operational costs of a average fleet, and if we take out the paying salaries and financing charges for the equipment, so we're looking at fuel. We're looking at the repair and maintenance, insurance, also tires and tolls. Those are probably the main costs, right, for any fleet. So again, if we can help them optimize those costs, these are the services that they will be willing to pay for. And so repair and maintenance, right? This is a major one. Goes back to that uptime, right? That I was talking about. So what we've done, since we were the first OEM to make all our trucks connected in North America. And right now, Volvo has over 1 million connected trucks globally. So we constantly harvest this data from the trucks and build predictive models. So it's AI based, and so we're able to provide what we call adaptive maintenance. Depending on the actual truck usage, we can recommend the service intervals. So it doesn't have to be like 50,000 miles, right, or something, right? If the truck is used relatively lightly, it can go for another 10,000 miles. And it's huge savings for a customer. So the truck doesn't have to go to the shop. So those are just some examples, right? And avoiding those nuclear verdicts, right? If you have the driver-facing camera set up in the truck, again, this is an investment for fleets.
No, absolutely. The examples you shared are just phenomenal. Essentially, you are looking at harvesting the data from your truck park. In automotive, we call it car park. So I'm calling it a truck park, and leveraging that data to create these predictive models and use that to kind of create services for your consumers, whether the earlier personas we talked about. So if I just get a little bit blunt, right? I come from the automotive space for the majority of my career, but I have also spent some time in trucking industry, and I definitely see the use of all of the services that you mentioned. But is this really truly proven, or is it something that is still being done, like from a revenue point of view? Have you been able
Oh,
to
we've been
recognize
selling
that?
those, we used to call it uptime bundle, those services for many years.
Oh,
So
perfect.
it is proven in a way. I mean, yes, we have a specific market and it's smaller, obviously, compared to passenger car market. But in a way, selling digital services is easier for commercial fleets than it is to individual drivers. Because there are
Perfect. So
very clear decision, sort of factors, right? And like I said, you can address those needs and those pain points. The fleet's going to be willing to pay for it.
it costs money otherwise, right?
Well, they'll be saving money, or they'll be, for example, we recently launched a new service called Load Finder. So, to help our customers avoid those empty miles, and, they can use it and find a load in the area where they're in. Again, that helps them generate revenue.
Maximizing their uptime.
Well, that too, yes.
So it seems like maybe the trucking market is little ahead in monetization. But before I conclude on that, I would love to hear from Mel because you're in the automotive space. So how do you see this monetization? Is this a reality or is this still being proven? Because there has been some backlash, right? For like heated car seats and some other OEMs have tried to kind of make some of these inherent value added features to be service, but there was a backlash. So how do you see that?
Yeah, and you make a really good point. I think it all goes back to the customer perception of fairness, and then what Alex said, the customer perception of value, just in the passenger space as opposed to the commercial space. So I think when you think about it as the model, I think there's an insurance company and then, an airline company. It's like only pay for what you need, right? Let's go to the customer in this era of affordability and say, look, you don't have to pay for all of these features, pay for the ones that are important to you. And so I think if we reframe the question and we get better at understanding what is important to our customers and allow them the ability to customize and choose what they should be paying for, they'll see it more as that value and that fairness as opposed to the nickel and diming aspect. So that's kind of the strategy as a customer. I couldn't speak to the overall Stellantis strategy, but as a customer, that's what I'd like to see going forward with these types of features on demand.
Because, even today, right, the majority of people who are still buying cars, that generation hasn't fully, like the new generation hasn't fully taken in. So we are still used to like buying a car with like loaded features, right? Like I have this sunroof, I have this feature, I have this package. And once it's there, I assume that any upgrade that comes should be free because I already paid for it, right? That mentality is still there. Even if you ask me also, I would probably say like, why am I paying for it? I already paid for the car. So from that point of view, do you see that your strategy is working the way you are putting it as a perception and the value point of view? Have you been able to successfully get that into the customers to kind of reap the rewards? And do you really see this to become a sustainable revenue stream?
I think it will evolve that way, but I would say it's very fledgling, right? You're really only seeing this type of model in Tesla has it, and then each of the OEMs do have some sort of subscription-based app, at least starting with Wi-Fi and some other services. Some are packaging their digital key within that space as well and offering some additional features like, a 360 surround view to your camera and connecting that data. But I would say, and noting big changes in subscription package prices, and the flexibility of a one-time fee for things, and allowing the customers to choose between that and the subscription. I'm seeing that so fluid amongst all the OEMs. So I would say we're all in the very early stages of trying to figure out how to model this effectively for the consumer market.
I love that. And just to kind of get like the early research point of view, right, Gyanendra, does your research also include like talking to the customers about what are they willing to pay and how they're willing to pay? Because some things I would like it as a bundle, and some things I may want to pay independently. And that might change between even me and my husband, even for that matter. And that is a true story. So how does your research show?
I mean, I personally don't have a lot of experience, at least in the monetization side of things. Generally, it's something that I don't really talk to customers about. But generally speaking, what we can say is that I think what Mel talked about, right? So or even I think you talked about, Susma. So in a sense, there's an expectation behind purchasing a vehicle with certain features as a given set, and then over the year updates, something is like totally fully expected now. The customers always expect the over-the-air updates, and then they always expect it to be free, things like that. But then at the same time, I think we're seeing a shift in terms of like when a certain feature, let's say like the hands-free feature, right, and it's offered for free for 3 years, and after that you pay a certain amount of money. That kind of seems to be taking hold pretty well. It seems, at least from the data, especially with the hands-free systems, like people are willing to try it out for like a long period of time, and once they like it, they're willing to pay for the service because it's fundamentally seen as almost like a software like defined system within the vehicle. Because if it's something like a hardware that has to be updated, then of course that I would assume people will be mad about it. But at the end of the day, if it's a software thing that actually you can offer more features, so you can say, hey, you're hands-free in the highway, now you can be hands-free even on the urban roads if you update to this package or whatever. I think people are willing to accept that because I think more in this today's world, we're very cognizant and we're very willing to pay for software in that aspect. And if the software is kind of in the vehicle and you like define it that way, I think people are willing to accept. But I mean, I don't have a data myself towards it, but at least like from what I've read, that's what it seems to be the case.
That's actually a very fantastic point of view because you're talking about like mapping OTA. So you're just doing an OTA update for the mapping feature. And also the example you gave, it actually requires you to have a data plan, right? It's not just like an application that is updated and the UI is updated, but somebody has to pay for the data plan. So that's a very good use case to show like why the customer is actually paying for it. Right. So that's great. So we all talked about, some of these subscription-based strategies for monetization. So what about some other strategies? Because I heard Alex talk about multiple times about this data, like the aggregated anonymized data. And I think Alex already talked about a little bit how he's using that data to kind of serve his global vehicle park, truck park, to be fair. So how do you see like the other use cases like insurances, logistics, smart city partners? How do you balance that with the like customer privacy? Have you seen the industry move towards these type of monetization opportunities?
And I think, Sushama, you bring up a great point here. So what I think we've been seeing is growing subscription fatigue on the side of the customers. The more subscriptions-based services you come up with, it's just becoming complicated, and customers really want to avoid any sort of overlapping subscriptions. And just general, it's just difficult, just like with if you have Netflix and Hulu, and, at some point it just becomes too much. So same, for the digital services, in trucking. So to me, in my opinion, it can be managed by bundling those services in very few, very clear, packages with very clear value proposition. But also, I think it would be very interesting to, and I believe in the potential of the services which are quote unquote free for the customer. For example, it could be that service that I mentioned earlier, the load finder, we make it free for the customer. So we find other ways to monetize it through the partner. Same can be applied for in-vehicle commerce use cases, paying for the fuel, paying for the parking, paying for the tolls, right? So if you integrate the virtual wallet with the vehicle and make it so you make it very convenient for the customer, and they don't have to buy a subscription to use it. I mean, I think I see a lot of potential in this, and I think we'll see more adoption of this model in the future. So you also mentioned that the data should be handled, very carefully and responsibly, right? First of all, data belongs to customer. And so we need to, as an OEM, we need to be fully transparent in how we use it, and we can only use it with permission from the customer. So we are CPRA compliant, right? And so it was something new for us in the B2B space. And I know in the passenger car market, it was, they kind of, they had to adopt this early on, but we converted to that, and so now we're fully compliant. And again, we respect the privacy. Every time, and let's say an infotainment app, customer wants to buy a new infotainment app or install it, right? It has to be very transparent what data points it's using. And so, because again, customer should have the transparency and be able to give permission to use their data.
But once that permission is given, right? So that data is now available to you. So have you tried some different monetization opportunities other than subscriptions, right? With the fleet or the driver itself, but maybe like insurance agencies, maybe some logistic partners, right? Who want to have that data, and where the company, even if it's anonymized, even the customer gives you, have you seen some way to generate revenue? So essentially, there is a direct interaction between the consumer and the vehicle and the data that comes, and the benefit is to me and I'm paying for it. But that data could be utilized by others also, right? Maybe somebody in government wants to know about the data to create new road structures, maybe, right? Maybe new infrastructures, maybe create EV charging stations, for example. So that data is pretty important, right? So have you seen kind of other models to monetize the data?
Well, I mean, yes, but we should be careful because, remember the data is the new oil, sort of battle cry, but that didn't quite work out the way it was expected. So it's not so much monetization, but you're right. I think, it could be, with customers' permission can be shared for the benefit of, society at large, right? It could be like for EV trucks, right? So they started by studying the routes, right? So it can, if we share this data with a, like Con Edison, for example, in New York, right? They can help them plan, where to put the chargers, things like that. So there is a lot of potential in sharing this data. But as far as just monetizing raw anonymous data, I think this been sort of proven not to work as expected.
Okay. So so we have now Alex's trucking industry point of view. What do you, Ganendra and Mel, if you have any thoughts from the passenger industry point of view?
I agree with everything Alex said. So I couldn't say it better myself, but I will give one little nugget of a use case that I think could be really interesting. Back to Alex's point about benefiting all. Real-time slippery road conditions, we can't detect black ice yet with our cameras. We can't detect potholes very well. So very quick real-time, 10 cars just slid 200 yards forward of me. That would make the roadways safer for all, because I was just reading about an accident just yesterday where one car hit another, and then it became a pile up, and 6 other cars are right in the mix, right? So I think the infrastructure data and delivering that value and that benefit. But with respect to everything he said on who owns the data, the customers own the data, and the opt-in strategy, and then just the trickiness of monetization, I couldn't agree with him more.
And that's pretty interesting, right? Like when you're talking about vehicle to infrastructure, V2X technology, and what are the experiences that enables and how that data could enable safety services and potentially monetization. So if I kind of put a bow on the monetization topic, in the trucking industry, monetization has been proven with the data and the services that you collect. On the passenger side, there is a mix of effort on what really gets paid and how people are willing to pay amongst the different OEMs. But in terms of using that vehicle data or the user data for different industries like insurance and others, and monetizing that is yet to be fully defined. Does that summarize it right?
Yes.
Yep.
I see all the nodding heads. So the next couple topics are about like personalization and the brand identity, right? So Gyanendra, what strategies can automakers use to develop personalized user interfaces that genuinely reflect and reinforce their unique brand identity? Since you are so close to the users and doing the research, I wanted to start with you and see what you have in mind.
Sure. So I think there's for people that own vehicles, and especially like loyal customers who own a specific kind of like let's say an Audi or like any other vehicles, generally they have a perception of what the vehicle looks like, feels like, or how it drives like, those kind of things. So all those things become a part of the holistic experience that users can kind of relate to, right? So in a sense, so every time, and as we're going towards more and more automation, like one has to think, okay, at some point in time, let's say all the vehicles are driving on their own. We don't have a steering wheel anymore. We don't have car seats that kind of give you this like premiumness feel and things like that. So how do you really identify yourself as a brand from a different one? And I think that's where the opportunity, like new opportunities comes in, which is basically now you have all this spaces that you can actually use and maybe add on experiences that you can give to the customer that maybe aligns with the expectation that they have of a brand. So for example, if you talk about Audi and let's say like some of the premium vehicle sector, then there are ideas about like how do you make sure that the customers can still engage with the vehicle in a way where it feels like an Audi vehicle. Maybe the color themes, maybe the feel of the leather, feel of even if there's no steering wheel, maybe the cup holder still looks like the same as the old Audi or something, right? So if you're driving a Porsche, then you still have like those rounded corners everywhere to kind of give a sense that you're still in this Porsche experience, those kind of things. So I think there's a way, and I think as the technology converges towards automation, I think the idea of like being with the users and like differentiating based on the human aspects become more and more important, I think. And then that's where the brand has to kind of play a role in terms of not just the function of the vehicle, but the experience of the vehicle. And I think it's gonna evolve in a way where you can already see that we're gonna be focusing more and more on the how do we really give that experience that's like feels different to any other OEMs, for example. So then I think it's a question that's not doesn't have an answer yet, but I think it's that's what we're going towards.
Maybe then I'll take that story to Stellantis and see what Mel has and how she is working through these wrecked Jeeps and other products that she has, like Dodge and others, and how does she balance that brand identity?
Yeah, I'd say it really capitalizes on that common tech backbone that we've talked about. So we have the Stella Smart Cockpit and the Stella Brain architectures, and those will enable those unique brand layers. But even prior to that, we're already being able to create great customizable experiences like the one-touch performance experience on the new Dodge Charger. It delivers like this with one button, instant transformation of the vehicle's personality, single button press, simultaneously adjust the drive modes, the cluster, the displays, the ambient lighting, and it even gives you this customized engineered Frexonic chambered exhaust sound profile. So we're already implementing that in our product right now, and I see it growing and proliferating with these technological pillars that we'll be able to introduce with Smart Cockpit and Stella Brain.
That's fantastic because what you have just talked about is personalization, right? Like if I enter the vehicle the way I want it to be set up for me versus any other family member or other driver is what that differentiation comes. But how does that differ? Because Audi could copy that feature, right? Like copy is not the right word, but kind of imitate, or somebody else could imitate that feature. I'm not saying that Audi would do that, but any other company could benchmark what users are looking for and create that feature. And personalization seems like one where you could have pretty much every brand eventually get the same type of feature, similar features, right? So how do you still create that differentiation for the brand?
Well, you're right that I think every OEM will roll out the ability to customize. What sets us apart is that we'll be customizing for some very specific use cases: performance, utility, off-road. And so that gives us a lot of stuff to work with respect to design cues, color palettes, custom vehicle dynamics, changing how you're interacting with your vehicle in real time. And, one of my favorite things on Instagram to look at is people failing while they're new towers and they're trying to put their boat in the water and they fail and the boat's going everywhere and it's a huge disaster, right? So I think about people that are dipping their toe into some of these great experiences that Stellantis has to offer with respect to our product. And if they're a new off-roader or a new tower, what can we do to personalize that experience, to customize that UX, and to help you as a first-time tower back that boat into the water with all of our camera visualization and now using AI to real time take a look at the boat launch angles and give you some feedback right to your interface. So I think it really is going to go back to your question, the experience that we're going to create for our customer based on our brand identities. That'll allow these same enabling technologies to customize and personalize for those specific types of customers.
So essentially, I like the differentiation you made about the technologies, because when we first started this conversation, you said it's based on this SDV platform, the software defined vehicle platform, and what your vehicle is able to create, right? Whether it's the suspensions, is the ride feel, the features, or the performance. All of those are integrated into this UI experience that creates these features for the brand identity. So it starts really rooted in the DNA of the product that brings it to the surface and creates that brand identity. So it's not as easy to say like, okay, I looked at Stellantis created this feature and I can copy paste to another brand and create the exact same experience, because it's rooted in your DNA and the way the product is built and structured. So perfect. So I in the trucking market, I believe it's not as competitive as passenger market. But Alex, if you had to quickly summarize, how do you focus on brand identity in your space would be pretty great.
Well, we have two brands in North America, which is Volvo Trucks and Mack Trucks, right? So both are very unique and proud brands. But if you look at them, right, so they very much serve different markets, right? So Mac is very strong in vocational services, which is like concrete mixers, construction, refuse. So those are the areas Mac has very strong presence. Mac, both Mac and Volvo built highway trucks, obviously. So it's a kind of but we try to create customized user experiences for those different use cases and with different brand identities. The challenge that we also have is that a lot of heavy-duty truck fleets in North America, I think the majority of them are mixed, which means that they have trucks, different brands. And fleet owners would prefer to have a very unified experience for drivers, because if you need to train drivers to drive a Volvo truck because he or she was driving Mac or something else before, So that would not be, an ideal outcome. So we try to balance that, but it's very important to have a unique brand identity.
Um, so I know we have almost been talking for more than 45 minutes. I have one last question, and we are going to wrap up in the interest of, the viewers of this conversation. One last question for all of you. If you had to summarize in one, sentence or quickly, how is your companies looking at the phone projection, and how do you see to address that? So maybe Mel, if you could quickly summarize that for us.
Sure. At Stellantis, we don't want to fight the popularity of CarPlay and Android Auto. We want to complement it. So we are working on a holistic approach. We want to offer that seamless phone projection, but still build a native experience that feels distinct to our brands and capitalizes on all of that vehicle functionality that we need to provide in our own user experience. So that is a deep integration with vehicle systems, safety features, and brand-specific UI that third-party apps can't replicate. So we'll both be playing in our spaces where we have the core experience, and we will have a dual strategy that allows for the customers their freedom of choice.
That's very succinctly put. Essentially, you want a co-development, where coexistence rather. How about you, Gyanendra and Alex?
Sure. So, I mean, I cannot speak to the Audi strategy, but from the research perspective, that's from the data that I've seen. I think it's fair to say that you can give the customers the best performing vehicle with all the best features, and if the Android CarPlay or the Apple CarPlay doesn't work, there's going to be a lot of complaints. So I think at the end of the day, it's really important because it's so ubiquitous and like pervasive for everyone. They really just want to sit and like start the car, and like the CarPlay has to connect automatically all the time, like, with no errors. So I think it's a really important aspect because the current customer base really needs it, really uses it. And I think Mel mentioned, I don't think there's any optimism to like fight it. It's more about complementing it, I think. But I honestly cannot speak about the company strategy. But from research side of things, it's extremely important to make sure that it actually works all the time.
How about you, Alex?
At Volvo, we provide the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support. But it's important to understand that what smartphone apps don't have is access to vehicle data. And most of the productivity, safety compliance apps that they need to have access to canvas data. So it's there's still place for the projection technologies to maybe supplement the entertainment options. But for most of the trucking apps, you do need direct access to canvas data, and also the trend that I see is that fleet owners would much prefer to have all the apps living on the dashboards, not on a smart device.
And that's very interesting, right? Like how the user personas and industries are kind of like differing a little bit, even if it's the same technologies that are at play. So, you guys have given such an amazing conversation today, and there are so many nuggets of information. I want to thank you for your time and sharing this amazing experience and your knowledge with the audience. So I would like to summarize this conversation in 3 key points. The first one is the digital cockpit is an evolving concept as you go from L1 through L4 and autonomous, or whether you're doing ride sharing or other types of mobility. This is an evolving space, what becomes a digital cockpit and the digital experiences you could get. And the second is the revenue models. Some of them are proven in certain industries like trucking, but in passenger industry, it's a bit of early to really predict that it's fully successful, but there is definitely proof that there are ways to make it really monetizable. And that's a good news because I love this industry. Finally, the market trend towards the phone projection. Obviously, for B2B and B2C, there is some differences. And the verdict, I would say, is still out there because I know we don't have time to talk about this. Maybe it's another podcast. But how do you get the data that you are kind of shut out when the user is using projection while driving and you don't get that data for you to create the new services, right? So I would say I understand that currently the market is going to provide both, and maybe the both projection plus in-house built applications will be both coexist, but I still have my doubts about the data when you're doing the projection, and how can you get access to that? So the battle continues and the evolution of digital cockpit continues. So thank you so much for all of you and for generously sharing your expertise with the audience.